All right, so are you ready to dive into some seriously fascinating stuff? We've got this collection of testimonies from Pastor Jerry Eze's YouTube channel,
Hmm.
specifically his end of year Strange Acts of God episode.
Oh, wow.
Now, for those who might not be familiar, Pastor Eze leads this massive online ministry focused on prayer and miracles. And
Yeah.
these end of year testimonies are kind of a big deal for his followers. It's where people share their experiences of what they believe to be divine intervention,
Yeah.
often in some really dramatic
It's like
situations.
a window into a world where faith takes center stage
Yeah.
and the impossible seems within reach.
Exactly. So we're talking about things like escaping near fatal accidents, experiencing sudden healings, and even couples having children after years of infertility.
Wow.
These stories, they aren't just heartwarming, they challenge our understanding of what's possible, and that's what we're here to explore.
Yes. And to do that, I think it would be helpful to start with the testimonies that focus on deliverance from death, since those really highlight the raw power of belief in the face of imminent danger.
Okay, so buckle up. We have one testimony about a car crash where the vehicle exploded and only 2 people survived.
Oh, my God.
Another tells the story of a man who was shot not once but twice in the same night.
Wow.
And then there's an account of a plane landing safely after losing both engines mid-flight. I mean, talk about edge of your seat stuff.
Right. And the common thread running through these near-death experiences is the use of the O Earth prayer.
Mm-hmm.
This prayer, from what I understand, is a key element of Pastor Eze's ministry. It's based on the idea that you can command the earth, the elements, even circumstances, to align with God's will for your life.
Okay.
So in these testimonies, people are using this prayer to literally plead for their survival.
That's interesting. But is there any evidence that this specific prayer has been effective outside of these testimonies? Has anyone studied its impact or anything?
That's a great question, and I haven't come across any scientific studies specifically on the O Earth prayer. But it does raise a broader question about the role of prayer in survival situations.
Right.
Some people believe that fervent prayer can create a sort of spiritual shield, protecting them from harm. Others might argue that it's simply a way to find comfort and courage in a terrifying situation.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like whether or not there's a direct intervention prayer can definitely have a powerful psychological effect.
Right.
But in these testimonies, people are convinced that it's more than just psychology. They see it as undeniable proof of divine intervention.
Absolutely. And it's that unwavering belief that I find so compelling.
But
They're not just hoping for a miracle, they're expecting it. And that expectation, that unwavering faith, is something we see across all categories of these testimonies, not just the ones about escaping death.
Okay, so let's move on to the next category, which I think you said was miraculous healings, right?
Exactly. And here's where it gets even more intriguing. We go from people defying death to people seemingly defying medical expectations. And that leads us to the most visually compelling testimony in this category. A man who was shot in the face.
Hold on, shot in the face. I'm already cringing.
It's a tough one to hear for sure.
Yeah.
But what makes it so striking is that his wounds completely vanished in 5 days with absolutely no scarring. And anyone who's seen a gunshot wound, let alone one to the face, knows the kind of healing defies typical medical norms.
Wow. Okay, that is definitely pushing the boundaries of what we consider possible.
Right. And it makes you wonder about the limits of our understanding of healing. What role does belief play in recovery? Is it purely physiological? Or is there a mind-body-spirit connection at work that we haven't fully grasped yet?
It definitely makes you think. And it's not just physical healing either, right? You mentioned another testimony about triplets healed of nonverbal autism.
Yes, and that one really highlights how these testimonies challenge our very definition of healing. It's not just about physical restoration. It's about transformations in cognition, behavior, and even social interaction. And that pushes us to consider how individual belief intersects with our understanding of neurological conditions and what constitutes a miracle in those contexts.
That's fascinating. So we've got people escaping impossible situations and experiencing incredible healings. But what else did you say was in this collection? Miracle babies.
Yes, and I have to say, those are some of the most emotionally resonant testimonies of the bunch.
Really?
We're talking about multiple births, triplets, quadruplets, happening after years of infertility, often in women over 40. The powerful testament to the enduring hope that people carry, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds.
Yeah, that makes sense. The desire to have children is so deeply personal, and societal pressures around fertility can be incredibly intense.
Yeah,
It's no wonder people turn to faith when they feel like they've exhausted all other options.
absolutely. And in these testimonies, we see how belief becomes a source of strength, a way to tap into a power beyond themselves. It's like they're drawing on a reservoir of hope that fuels their journey toward parenthood.
It's like when science says no, faith says keep going.
Yes, and it highlights the power of believing in something beyond the realm of our current understanding. And that brings us to one testimony in particular that I think you'll find truly remarkable.
Okay, lay it on me. What's so special about this one?
This woman meticulously documented over 500 testimonies of miracle babies.
500. Wow. That's dedication.
Right, and she wasn't just collecting these stories, she was using them as fuel for her own faith.
Oh, wow.
It's like she created her own personal roadmap to believing, drawing strength and inspiration from the experiences of others who had walked a similar path.
I can totally see that. It's
Yeah.
like if it happened for them, maybe it can happen for me too.
Exactly. And this woman's story speaks to a powerful dynamic that we see throughout these testimonies. The role of shared experiences in bolstering individual faith.
Yeah.
It's like these stories become a tangible manifestation of hope, a testament to the possibility of the impossible.
It's like the opposite of that saying, misery loves company. In this case, it's more like miracles love company.
That's a great way to put it. And it speaks to the interconnectedness of human experience, how we draw strength and inspiration from one another, especially when facing challenges that feel overwhelming.
Okay, so we've covered these incredible stories of people defying death, experiencing amazing healings, and even welcoming miracle babies into their lives. It's clear that belief plays a huge role in these experiences, but how does it actually work? What's the mechanism behind it all?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's one that has fascinated theologians, philosophers, and scientists for centuries. But before we delve into the potential mechanisms, I think it's important to acknowledge the power of the altar of fire in Pastor Eze's ministry.
Okay, the altar of fire. Can you explain what that is for those who might not be familiar?
Sure. In many Christian traditions, fire symbolizes purification, transformation, and the presence of God. So when Pastor Eze talks about the altar of fire, he's creating a symbolic space for intense, focused prayer where people can bring their deepest desires and petitions before God. It's like a spiritual focal point where they believe their prayers are amplified and sent heavenward.
So it's like a metaphorical furnace where their faith is refined and intensified.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that leads us back to the question of mechanism. Could it be that this collective focus, this shared energy, amplifies their individual prayers and intentions? Could it be that when people come together with a common purpose and unwavering faith, they create a kind of spiritual synergy that makes the impossible possible? Or is there something else at play, something we haven't even begun to understand?
It's definitely a mind-bending concept. But I think one thing is clear. Whether we're talking about defying death, overcoming illness, or experiencing miracles of any kind, there's something incredibly powerful about the human capacity for belief.
Absolutely. And as we move forward in our exploration of these testimonies, I think it's important to keep that in mind. Because while we may not have all the answers, these stories offer a compelling glimpse into the extraordinary potential that lies within each of us when we dare to believe.
It's one thing to talk about these strange acts in a theoretical sense.
But it's another thing entirely to hear the raw emotion in these people's voices as they recount their experiences. Like that woman who was bedridden for 9 years. 9 years.
Yeah.
And then suddenly recovers after Pastor Eze speaks a word of knowledge. Hearing her describe that moment,
Yeah.
the sheer joy and disbelief, it really hits you in the feels.
Absolutely. And I think that's what makes these testimonies so compelling. They're not just stories. They're lived experiences filled with raw emotion, vulnerability, and the kind of deep faith that can move mountains.
Yeah, and it's not just about individual experiences either.
Yeah.
There's a strong sense of community, of shared belief
Right.
that seems to amplify the power of these testimonies. Like, remember that woman who documented over 500 miracle baby stories?
Yeah.
She wasn't just collecting them for fun. She was using them to bolster her own faith and to inspire others who are struggling with infertility. Right. Her story is a perfect example of how personal testimonies can become a source of collective empowerment. It's like they create a ripple effect where one person's faith can inspire another and another until it becomes a wave of positive change.
It's like that old proverb, a single spark can start a fire.
Right.
In this case, it's like a single testimony can ignite a whole movement of belief.
That's a great analogy.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes me wonder, are there similar dynamics at play in other areas of life?
Mm-hmm.
Like, could sharing stories of resilience and triumph in business or art or even personal development
Yeah.
create a similar ripple effect, inspiring others to overcome challenges and achieve their goals?
That's a great question.
Hmm.
And I think it speaks to a deeper truth about human nature.
Right.
We're social creatures hardwired to connect with each other and learn from each other's experiences. And stories, especially stories of hope and transformation, have a unique power to bridge divides and inspire collective action.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the key takeaways from these testimonies. They remind us that we're not alone in our struggles and that there's immense power in shared belief and collective action.
Speaking of shared belief, we've talked a lot about the altar of fire as a focal point for prayer in Pastor Eze's ministry.
Yeah.
But how does that tie into the broader concept of faith and miracles?
Well, the altar of fire, as we mentioned earlier, is a symbolic space where people believe their prayers are amplified and sent heavenward. But I think it also represents something more profound.
Okay.
It's a symbol of transformation, of purification, of the burning away of doubt and fear, leaving only pure faith behind.
So it's not just about the physical act of praying, it's about creating a mental and emotional space where belief can flourish.
Exactly. And that's where the concept of the placebo effect comes in. You've probably heard of it.
Mm.
It's a phenomenon where people experience real, measurable improvements in their health simply because they believe they're receiving a treatment, even if that treatment is actually inert.
Yeah, I've heard about that. It's like mind over matter, right? But how does that relate to these testimonies?
Well, some skeptics might argue that the miracles reported in these testimonies are nothing more than the placebo effect in action.
Okay.
They might say that the power of suggestion, the belief in Pastor Enley's healing abilities, and the emotional intensity of the altar of fire experience create a psychological environment where the body's natural healing mechanisms are amplified.
That's an interesting perspective. So are you saying these people aren't actually experiencing miracles, but rather tricking their bodies into healing themselves?
I wouldn't go that far. It's more nuanced than that.
Yeah.
I think it's important to acknowledge the potential role of a placebo effect,
Right.
but I also think it's premature to dismiss the possibility of something more profound at play.
Okay.
After all, the placebo effect itself is still not fully understood. There's clearly a powerful mind-body connection at work, but we're only just beginning to unravel its mysteries.
So it's like science is catching up to what people of faith have known for centuries. That belief has the power to heal and transform.
Exactly. And it's not just about faith healing either. We see the power of belief manifesting in all sorts of ways, from athletes breaking world records to entrepreneurs building successful businesses. When people truly believe in something, they tap into a source of energy and determination that can overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles.
It's like belief is the fuel that powers the engine of human potential.
That's a great way to put it. And it brings us back to the question of mechanism. If belief is so powerful, how does it actually work? What's the science behind it all?
Right.
Well, there's a growing body of research exploring the mind-body connection, and it's revealing some fascinating insights. For example, studies have shown that positive emotions like hope and optimism can actually boost the immune system and promote healing.
Okay, so maybe it's not just about believing in a higher power. It's about believing in ourselves and our own capacity to heal and thrive.
Exactly. And I think that's an important takeaway from these testimonies. Whether you interpret them as literal miracles or as powerful examples of the mind-body connection, they remind us that belief is a force to be reckoned with. And when we cultivate a mindset of faith, hope, and possibility, we open ourselves up to a world of extraordinary potential.
Okay, so we've explored the power of belief, the placebo effect, and the mind-body connection. But what about the role of community? We've seen how shared testimonies can strengthen faith and inspire collective action, but is there a scientific basis for this phenomenon?
Absolutely. Sociologists have long recognized the power of group dynamics and social influence.
Right.
We're inherently social creatures, and our beliefs are often shaped by the people around us. When we're surrounded by a community of like-minded individuals who share our faith and values, it strengthens our own convictions and makes it easier to maintain those beliefs even in the face of challenges or doubts.
So it's like having a support system for your belief system.
Exactly. And it's not just about emotional support either. There's a fascinating concept in sociology called collective effervescence,
Okay.
which describes the heightened energy and sense of unity that people experience when they come together for a shared purpose. Think about sporting events religious gatherings, or even political rallies. There's a palpable energy in those settings, a feeling of being part of something larger than yourself.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. There's something electric about being in a crowd of people who are all focused on the same thing, feeling that shared passion and energy.
Right. And that collective energy can be incredibly powerful, can inspire extraordinary acts of courage, generosity, and even, some might argue, miracles.
So are you saying that the altar of fire experience, with its intense focus on prayer and shared belief, could be tapping into this collective effervescence?
I think it's definitely possible. When people gather in that setting with a shared desire for healing and transformation, they're creating a powerful social dynamic that can amplify their individual faith and create a sense of collective empowerment. And that, in turn, could contribute to the extraordinary experiences they report.
Okay, so we've got the power of individual belief, the placebo effect, the mind-body connection, and the dynamics of collective effervescence. It's like a perfect storm of factors converging to create these seemingly impossible outcomes.
That's a great way to put it. It's a complex interplay of psychological, social, and perhaps even spiritual forces that we're only just beginning to understand.
It's definitely making me rethink my own assumptions about what's possible. And it makes me wonder, if belief is such a powerful force, how can we cultivate it more effectively in our own lives?
Right.
How can we tap into that reservoir of hope and possibility, even when faced with challenges or doubts?
That's a great question, and one that we'll explore further as we delve into the final part of our deep dive.
So we've explored these incredible testimonies, unpacked the potential mechanisms at play,
Right.
and even touched on some fascinating sociological and psychological concepts.
Yeah.
But I think the big question on everyone's mind is,
What does it mean for us?
yeah, what does this all mean for us? How can we take these insights and apply them to our own lives?
That's the key, isn't it? It's one thing to marvel at these stories, but the real transformation happens when we start to see the connections
Right.
between these experiences and our own lives.
Right. Because let's be honest, we don't all have a Pastor Eze in our lives leading us in prayer at an altar of fire.
Right.
But we all have challenges, doubts,
Yeah.
and moments where we need a boost of faith, hope, or maybe even a little bit of that miracle energy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's so important to focus on the underlying principles at work here. We've talked about the power of belief, the mind-body connection, and the dynamics of collective effervescence. These aren't just abstract concepts. They're tools that we can all use to create positive change in our own lives.
Right. Okay, so how do we actually put these tools into practice?
Well, let's start with belief. One thing that struck me about these testimonies is the unwavering conviction
Yeah.
of the individuals involved.
Yeah.
They didn't just hope for a miracle. They expected it. They truly believed that it was possible.
Right.
And that belief seemed to fuel their actions and shape their reality.
So you're saying that instead of just wishing for things to get better,
Yeah.
we need to cultivate a deep, unshakable belief that they can and will get better.
Exactly. And that starts with becoming aware of our own internal dialogue. The stories we tell ourselves about
Yeah.
our limitations and our capabilities.
Right.
Are we focusing on what's possible or what's impossible? Are we dwelling on past failures or envisioning future successes?
Yeah.
Our beliefs shape our reality. So it's crucial to cultivate a mindset of possibility even in the face of challenges.
That makes sense. It's instead of saying, I can't, we need to start asking, how can I?
Exactly. And that shift in perspective can be incredibly powerful. It opens up new possibilities and empowers us to take action even when we're feeling afraid or uncertain.
Okay, so we've got belief. What about the mind-body connection? How can we tap into that to improve our well-being?
Well, we know that stress and negative emotions can have a detrimental effect on our health, weakening our immune system and making us more susceptible to illness.
Right.
On the flip side, positive emotions like joy, gratitude, and hope can actually boost our immune system and promote healing. So one way to harness the mind-body connection is to cultivate a more positive emotional state.
Okay, that sounds great in theory.
Right.
But how do we actually do that? Life throws curveballs all the time.
Yeah.
How do we stay positive when things are tough?
That's a great question, and it's not always easy.
Yeah.
But there are practices that can help.
Okay.
Things like mindfulness, meditation, gratitude journaling, and spending time in nature have all been shown to reduce stress and promote positive emotions.
So it's about actively cultivating a mindset of positivity and well-being rather than just hoping it will magically appear.
Exactly. It takes effort, but the rewards are worth it. And it's not just about feeling good. It's about creating a physiological environment that supports healing and resilience.
Okay, so we've covered belief and the mind-body connection. What about collective effervescence? How can we tap into that power in our everyday lives?
Well, as we discussed earlier, collective effervescence is that heightened energy and sense of unity that people experience when they come together for a shared purpose.
Right.
We might not all have an altar of fire to gather around,
Yeah.
but we can still seek out communities and experiences that foster a sense of connection, purpose, and shared belief.
So things like joining a church group, volunteering for a cause we believe in, or even just spending time with loved ones who share our values.
Exactly. It's about finding those spaces where we feel a sense of belonging, where we can contribute to something larger than ourselves, and where we can draw strength and inspiration from others who share our vision.
You know, thinking back to those testimonies, one thing that really struck me was the sense of agency these individuals displayed.
Yeah.
They didn't just sit back and wait for a miracle to happen. They actively participated in creating it.
Right.
They prayed fervently, they sought out guidance,
Mm.
and they took action even when the odds seemed stacked against them.
That's such an important point.
Yeah.
Belief without action is just a wish. To truly manifest our desires, we need to combine faith with effort.
Mm-hmm.
We need to take those inspired actions step by step, even when we don't see the full path ahead.
So it's like a dance between faith and action, belief and effort. We set the intention, we take the steps, and we trust that the universe or God or whatever higher power we believe in
Yeah.
will meet us halfway.
Beautifully put. It's a dynamic interplay, a partnership between our human will and the forces that shape our reality. And as we've seen in these testimonies, that partnership can yield extraordinary results.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
what's the one message you want our listeners to take away?
I'd say it's this. The power to create miracles, whether big or small, lies within each of us.
Mm-hmm.
It's a matter of cultivating belief, harnessing the mind-body connection, seeking out supportive communities, and taking inspired action.
Right.
We may not all experience the same dramatic, strange acts recounted in these testimonies, but we all have the capacity to create positive change in our lives and in the world around us.
Beautifully said. And remember, folks, this is just the beginning. There's a whole world of belief, possibility, and human potential waiting to be explored.
Absolutely.
So keep questioning, keep seeking, and keep believing because you never know what miracles you might create.